Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you for taking some time out here this evening to be on this uh, Safer Upstate call with us. We're going to give it another minute or two. We've got a few more folks who are, I'm sure, going to uh, sign in with us. But we will be mindful of everyone's time. We have a great uh, program planned with some very good uh, presenters and conversations. So if you'll give us a minute or so, we will get ready to start in about a minute or so. Justine, you just tell me when you think we're ready.
I think we're good to go.
Oh, good. Well, that's easy enough. So welcome, everyone. I'm Dean Hebel. I'm the Executive Director of 10 at the Top, and we are pleased to be presenting this virtual workshop of our Beyond the Shield series. This is one we do each year with community leaders and law enforcement. For those who have been part of some of the other sessions we've had over the last year and a half, we typically have a specific topic that we talk about, and Justine will show some of what we've done with those in the past. But for this one each year, we found, and we did this last year, and actually in December of 2021, and it was just a great session to have more of an open dialogue. One of the findings from the Discovery Committee that we started in 2020 around the idea of creating a safer upstate and bringing opportunities for law enforcement and community leaders to talk and work together was the idea of transparency. And this virtual session, which of course started during the pandemic when we really were not able to be together in person, has turned out to be just a really great way of sharing some of the nuances of law enforcement and how they go about making decisions in some of their day-to-day operations, and then engaging our community in a conversation to understand, ask questions, and things of that nature. So this session is specifically designed to be that open forum dialogue. We have the questions that you all asked in your registration, which were really good and will probably have no trouble keeping us engaged for 90 minutes. We also have a couple community leaders that you will be introduced to in a minute. You can see the names of both our law enforcement members and our community members on the slide here. And I know we're hopefully a couple of the law enforcement we're still waiting on, I believe. So we're hoping that they will make it in, but we will get started here in a minute. Justine, if you can go to the next slide for me. It is really what the purpose of, as I mentioned, the Creating a Safer Upstate initiative is. And this came out of a discovery committee that was created in 2020 by 10 at the Top's then chairman, Mayor Terrence Roberts from the city of Anderson. And the idea was after some of the incidents that had happened between law enforcement and the community, to get an understanding of where things stood here in the upstate and where we could, how we could work together to ensure that as our community continues to grow, that we value both our law enforcement officers and the members, all members of our upstate community. And so what came out of that discovery committee was really this purpose statement to create a safer and more united upstate region where all law enforcement stakeholders work collaboratively with community leaders to foster a culture that respects and values the lives of officers and of all residents. And so over the last 2 years, we have worked to accomplish that in multiple different ways. Justine, if you can go to the next slide. there has been a lot of work done, trying to kind of demystify the interactions between law enforcement and the community. Often those occur only when there is a crisis situation. And so, the idea is, how can we create opportunities where especially our children, our young people, see law enforcement as a natural part of the community, and not just as the people that show up when there's something that went wrong. And so Fist Bump Fridays have come out of this. There have been other programs throughout the years that law enforcement, some in our community and others, have done that are very similar. High Five Fridays back, before COVID and those kind of things. But this is a purposeful quarterly Friday morning where officers from across the region go to schools and interact with the students, not for a negative reason or anything, but just to be there and to have the opportunity to interact and say good morning and wish them well, either for a good day or sometimes after the school day, wishing them a good weekend. In addition, I mentioned we've done the Beyond the Shield sessions. Now this is starting our third year, calendar year of this. And each one, with the exception of ones like tonight, have had a specific topic. So use of force, technology and law enforcement, recruitment, retention and training, law enforcement, outreach strategies, analytics, as they drive policing, and victim advocacy. And all of these, I will note, and Justine will put it in the chat, are available on our YouTube channel for you to watch. We also have created podcasts of each of these, so you can listen to the podcast if you're like me and you like to walk and listen to podcasts. So these sessions really have been a great eye-opener for me, and hopefully for those of you who have been part of them, to understand a little bit more about how law enforcement makes decisions on a daily basis. And then we have also been able over the last year to do some in-person sessions in partnership with Tri-County Technical College. We've done in-person community and law enforcement sessions in Anderson, Oconee, and Pickens, and we plan this year to do a number of them in other communities, Greenville and Spartanburg, and likely other places across the region. And then National Night Out is a program that may be familiar to some of you, that's done each year, usually in August, although some have also done it in October. And the idea there is to have a community night where law enforcement and the community engage together. This past year in the Upstate, there were a lot of those sessions. I had the pleasure of going to one in Easley. I know Justine went to one, I think, in Greenville, and I know they were held in Spartanburg and many other places across the Upstate. So we had the national coordinator of that on a call last year to help with kind of ideas. And one of the things we're doing this year is, again, trying to encourage and assist communities in having those programs across their communities. But all of this is around what I said earlier, kind of this idea that we're all in it together, and law enforcement and the community really, if we want to be a place where we value all lives, we need to have opportunities for folks to engage and not feel intimidated or only see each other when there are crises or negative situations. So that's just kind of a little overview of the history of this initiative and this program. And one of the great parts, as I mentioned a couple times, has been this Beyond the Shield series. And I am very sure that this series would not have been as successful as it has been if it were not for Chief Matt Hamby from the city of Greer. And Chief Hamby, I want to again thank you for all you continue to do to support the work of the Creating the Safer Upstate initiative and within your community. I'm blessed to be a Greer resident, to be working to ensure that law enforcement and the community does engage and work collaboratively. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Chief Hamby, who is going to introduce our law enforcement representatives. And then we also will introduce kind of our leaders of the community session. Keisha Nelson from Michelin has been one of our co-chairs of that effort and will lead that component tonight. So we'll introduce those folks. But again, to emphasize for everyone on the call, this is designed to be an open dialogue. So you will have a chance to ask questions in chat at any time. If you want to expand on a question, you can raise your hand in the Zoom, where to let us know that you want to ask a question or talk. We do ask everyone, and I'm sure with this group we'll be fine, but to be respectful, we respect the ideas and opinions of everyone, and this topic certainly at times can be very personal and can get to a sense of concern or tension. But we want to respect everyone and everyone's views and opinions tonight, and have another great dialogue and a great session. So with that, I will turn it over to Chief Hamby.
Thank you, Dean. I appreciate the opportunity to just be a part of this great venture that we've been on for the past 2 years. We have covered a lot of ground from the summer of 2020, I believe, is when we started up, and I think we've been able to reach several hundred people in these Zoom panels, and covered a lot of different topics. And I think we've had some really good questions come in. And I do think the structure of the one we did back in December of 21, that was an open forum, kind of like tonight, was probably the best one we had done, because it was a very kind of a transparent opportunity for questions to be thrown out to the law enforcement professionals. And it gave us a good chance to if there were questions that really were important to people in individual communities or cities, that they had immediate access to some of the sheriffs who were participating and the chiefs. And that was just a really, really good experience. So I'm hoping that tonight is something similar to that. We had Sheriff Dennis Kelly invited. I don't see him here yet, but if he joins us, that would be spectacular. So myself, my role tonight is I'll probably be fielding some questions due to our panel might be a little smaller than we had hoped it was. But otherwise, I'll be sort of passing on some of the questions to different members of law enforcement who are here on the panel this evening. But I'll be glad to pitch in as well and address some of the questions that come out. So if Sheriff Kelly joins us, we'll try to catch that and introduce him. But myself, let me just give a very brief, who am I? I'm Matt Hamby, Greer Police Department. I've worked here for 30 years now, and I've been the chief here for 5.5 years. So I started here as a young man right out of college, and I've been here ever since. So it's been my honor and pleasure to serve our city here in Greer for my entire career. We have with us Chief Campos from Clemson Police Department. And if you're okay with that, Chief, I'll let you give a brief self-introduction of where you've been in your career and what got you there today.
Yes, sir. Thank you. As Chief Hamby said, Chief Campos with the City of Clemson's Police Department. I've been in law enforcement officially almost 33 years now. I started my career in Florida. I left there 2 years ago to become the chief here. And so obviously been here for 2 years. Worked all different type of assignments all the way up to chief inspector in my last agency, where I was in charge of many departments up there, to include our accreditation and internal affairs and a lot of the administrative stuff right there at the end before I moved on. Thank you, Chief.
Thanks, Chief Campos. I appreciate that. And I do see Sergeant Natalie Hill has joined us from Greenville County Sheriff's Office. So Sergeant Hill, if you could give a better self-introduction, please, tonight.
Absolutely. Thank you. Hi, I am Natalie Hill. I work for the Greenville County Sheriff's Office. I've been in law enforcement for the past 26 years, and the majority of my career here at the Greenville County Sheriff's Office has been with the Community Service Division, where I am the crime prevention supervisor. And so we're engaged in the community quite a bit, from the schools, businesses, churches, neighborhood watch groups. And the role from the sheriff's office perspective is to reach out to community members, find out what's going on, bring that information back to the sheriff's office so that we can better assist the community members on whatever level they're requesting us for. So thank you for having us here tonight.
Thank you, Sergeant. I want to acknowledge, I see Major Miller in attendance here. I don't think Major Miller was given specific duties to be a panelist or anything, but she's more than welcome to join in, I'm sure, if she feels appropriate with any of the questions that come out. So just wanted to make sure we recognize Major Ty Miller.
Thank you, Chief. I appreciate it. My name is Ty Miller. I'm the administrative major over the Greenville County Sheriff's Office. I've been here about 24 years. And I'm so pleased to have the opportunity just to join you guys tonight and kind of get a feeling of what's going on and what a great thing has been put together. I just appreciate the opportunity. Sergeant Hill's more than capable of managing all this tonight, but she's really done a great job and just really makes us really connects us to the community. And we're so proud of her and so glad that this group is here, and thankful for the opportunity to join you.
Very good. So Dean, I believe we'll let our community leaders introduce themselves at this point.
Yes, I think we'll turn it over to Keisha, and if you want to introduce yourself, and then Ms. Russell and Tiffany, and we'll go from there.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Keisha Nelson. I work for Michelin, North America, and I've been a part of this Beyond the Shields committee for a year and a half now. And I must say that it's been very educational and eye-opening, because, you know, a lot of times we have this perception in our head based on media or just things that we think. But being a part of this group, I've truly learned and see law enforcement in a totally different way than the perception that I had. And so my goal today is to be moderating the questions. And so we're going to let Ms. Dorothy Russell and then Tiffany introduce themselves. And we just want you to kind of tell us why or what interest you have in creating a safer upstate and beyond the shield. Ms. Russell.
Sorry, I'm a little slow.
You're fine.
My name is Dorothy Russell. Most people know me as Dot Russell. I am the neighborhood president for the Sterling community in Greenville. My community is quite unique. Half of my community is actually falls in the city line when you look at the map. And the other half of my community falls within the county line. So not only do we have the issues that most urban communities have, we also have the politics of learning how to navigate in two different areas. We understand that the county operates different from the city, so one answer doesn't apply. For me, this is my first time being a part of this. It's very exciting to me. When I first heard about it, I thought, wow, this is a way that I can gain a lot of information to take back to my neighbors, because we do have conversations quite a bit about what is happening and how we can make a better impact in our community. So as well as being a part of this exciting venture, I'm also here as a student to learn and to gather information to take back. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Russell. Next, we're going to have an introduction by Ms. Tiffany Davidson Parker.
Hello, everyone. Good evening. Yes, I am Tiffany Davidson Parker, and I serve as the CEO and founder for Universal Therapeutic Services. For short, I call it UTS. So UTS is a community-based mental health care organization that is focused on making sure that those who are oftentimes less served are having access to quality mental health care services and supports. And so we partner with community organizations like Unity Health on Main, Legacy Charter, Share, Gant Fire Department. And so we are here to continue to serve and make sure that, folks who need mental health care services and supports are available. Keisha, you asked, what is it that I want to do to help bring this community feeling more safe, right? And so, really breaking the stigma around mental illness, and letting people know that mental health is not mental illness, right? That we can get services. It doesn't matter if you're Latino, if you're Black, if you're Asian, if you're white. I mean, it doesn't matter of your ethnicity or your background, but services are available and affordable. And so that's what I aim to continue to bring to any community that we're in. So yeah, so we're serving across the Upstate. We have clinicians that are serving clients out of Spartanburg, here in Greenville, Pickens, Easley, and so Anderson. So yeah, so we're glad to be a part. Thank you for this invitation. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much for the introduction.
Before Keisha keeps going, will you be sure and put your contact information and the information about your organization in the chat so people can see that? Because I'm sure not everyone is familiar with you and with your organization.
Sure will. Thank you, Dean.
Okay. Sorry, Keisha. Back
You're
to
fine.
you.
So at this time, we're going to ask both Ms. Russell and Ms. Davidson Parker to to ask 3 questions each. Each of you, when you registered, you submitted questions that we will ask our panel. But if you see at any time during the question and answers that you have another question, please either type it in the chat or use the raise your hand feature. And so at this time, we're going to start with Ms. Russell. So Ms. Russell, any concerns or questions that you have for the panel, please present those now. Thanks.
Okay. One of the questions is, can you share some of the efforts that you are making in engaging the Latino, Asian population in the Upstate?
Okay. I will ask if Sergeant Hill, would you want to address that question?
Yes. Hi. We have quite a few engagement features, or should I say programs, that we have within the Sheriff's Office. We have a diversion, or should I say diversity unit that works with all groups within Greenville County on different levels, on community events, on church safety presentations. We do some church safety active shooter presentations to some churches in the community, Hispanic communities. And so we engage on different levels, community outreach. You like to speak Hispanic? We also have Deputy Joy with us this evening, and let's see, let her share some information as well in reference to your question, Ms. Russell.
Hola. As far as reaching out to the Hispanic community and making those connections, we've been holding what are called pop-up talks, where we just arrive, pop up a tent, and just start talking to the community that's in there, because a lot of these people who live in our communities do not have normal community meetings to attend. meaning in the area that they don't know about it or that's out of their area. So there's not a formed community monthly, what would you call it?
Community outreach
Your-
meeting.
one of your programs that it's monthly, where all the community gets together and starts speaking about what's going on in the neighborhood, the crime, the this and the that. So to give them a voice, we go out to them, to the apartment complexes where the majority of those Hispanics are, to the different areas where they are gathered more in that large amount, so that we are able to ask them what is going on, what have they seen, what has, and it gives a whole different kind of aspect when they see us just popping up a tent. We want to talk to you and be out here with you. We've also brought in other people, other organizations, to have fun days with the kids, which is very unexpected, because when law enforcement goes into some of these places, it's usually just to handle whatever the situation is, and then they leave. It's not an interaction in this way. So popping up at this point and coming out to be with these kids is out of the norm, but it allows us to open the lines of communication, because I'll knock at all the doors that are in that apartment complex, that whole entire area, just so they can let them know, listen, this is just us out here having some interaction with the kids. These kids are playing between throwing the ball back and forth, doing these stack up games, Jenga, different kinds of life-size stuff to play with these kids, some sidewalk chalk, and then the parents come along and then they start asking questions. Then they start asking the hard questions about driver's license and what happens when you don't have your papers, and how can they go about this, and domestic violence. All those conversations start to begin, because Hispanics are I know from experience that Hispanics are not going to approach law enforcement unless it's a end all situation.
And
Thank you. And now that you said that, one of my questions is, do you have the ability, I don't know, within your job scope, when you are talking to folks who live in an area where there is not a neighborhood association, or they don't have that, do you have the authority to direct them as to how they can get that started, even in a small group, like maybe reaching out to the United Way? There's a lot of training there to show them how to set up their own community association, that kind of thing. So, or is that outside of your area of expertise? Are you all allowed to do something like that, or even refer them to the closest neighborhood association to them?
Yes, so we have set up so that they can be referred to the neighborhoods that are having those neighborhood community watch, and if they don't have one, the proximity, because a lot of these apartment complexes, they're all in one spot. So you've got everybody that's right there. So to travel, 10, 15 minutes to get to one, it's not really what's going on in their area. And that was the big pop-up that we did all last year through the Highlands, through Boulder Creek. We were going from one to another, to Cedar Lane, to any of those ones that we knew were not a part of that. Now, as far as if they wanted to start something, we started many of the programs where it was involving the kids. We had organizations come that were affiliated with the churches to bring in so that they could have sports that are related. Females like the Period Project. We brought in that kind of education because those are the ones who use those kind of products longer than should. So the education that goes into that. So we brought a lot of education into them and organizations into them. We even brought a Big Air so that they could, we brought their street team out there just so that they can experience those things that they may not be able to go to. And then we set them up with Sergeant Hill, who lines up, who wants to start a neighborhood watch, how do you go about this? So then all of those things go in place. But it starts with the first pop-up.
Thank you.
I see Chief Campos wanted to comment as well.
Thank you, Dean. One of the things I wanted to point out, and Officer Joy can confirm or counter what I'm about to say, but in the Clemson area, we're a small city, we're a small police department, and most of our Hispanic communities, where they live is outside of the city. And if they come into the city, they're coming into the city for jobs or they're coming in for entertainment. And one of the challenges that we run into, especially up in this area, is many of the folks in these communities are either undocumented, they're not citizens, and there is a fear among them in approaching the police because they don't know whether we're going to, round them up and deport them or put them through some type of process like that. So it's very difficult to approach them because they don't know why we're approaching them. And even if we're trying to be nice and trying to explain things to them, that hurdle is always there. And even when we have our encounters in a traffic stop or other situations, that is always the underlying concern that most of them have, not only to mention a language barrier a lot of times. So one of the things that we've done here to try to help with that is we have a limited English language policy within our agency, and all of my officers have cell phones assigned to them. So if they encounter somebody that doesn't speak English very well, they have a resource that they can go to where they can call somebody that can translate for them right there on the spot. I know there's a lot of people that like to use Google Translate and some of these other automated translation programs, but if you're a true speaker, those translation programs get the tense wrong. They get and it just causes more confusion sometimes than it alleviates. So those especially over in this area, Walhalla is a big area where a lot of our Hispanic communities live, but they work and play down towards Clemson and other areas, and these are some of the challenges that we have. So I have been in communication with some of the chiefs in the surrounding neighborhoods and sheriffs to try to get more opportunities for us to come out and talk, let them know this is who we are, try to assure them we're not there to take them away. If they truly are a victim of a crime, we can help them and refer them to those resources as needed so that we can help out with that. I know we just took in 12 Mile Beach, which is right on Lake Hartwell, and a lot of our Hispanics in the summertime, that's where they go for recreation. So we have to do some things as a city. We have to put signs in dual languages, and we have to have some of those things available so they can ask the questions that are needed. But there's still that challenge up here. Much like which Officer Joy explained, a lot of Hispanics tend to live in the same area. It's the same thing up here, but they're more rural, and so it's a little more difficult to get into those areas.
Chief Campos, I want to follow up on the other part of Ms. Russell's question, which related to our Asian population. I also will include the Muslim population as well, groups that have been targeted by some people for violence and things of that nature. How have you all, and I don't know how big those populations are necessarily in Clemson, but maybe in your past experiences and others, have you seen in trying to make sure that those folks who maybe have been threatened and may feel insecure, how they know that there is law enforcement is watching them and taking care and is there for them?
So that's kind of two-folded, because we have the populations that are affiliated with the university, where they may be attending school, but they have their families and they live in the city. There are organizations on campus before school starts that will invite us to large meetings to have those discussions, explain who we are. I attended a meeting for the Indian population right before school started. And also Lutheran Services, when they brought the asylum seekers from Afghanistan in, we have a good number of Afghan folks who live here. We set up a meeting with them as well as shortly after they moved here to have the same type of discussions, where to go to get resources or help, and that we're there to help them, not to hinder them. We also learned were blessed enough to get the addresses where they lived, so that if we get a 911 call in at that address and there's a language barrier, we know ahead of time we need to get an interpreter on the line, and not only interpret, it's not as simple as Spanish, even though Spanish is complex in some other parts of the world, but depending on where you come from in Afghanistan may be a different Arabic language that you speak. So knowing what they speak at that address helps us in getting aid to them and what we need to do. So the local mosque will invite us in and have discussions with them to inform them of the services that are available and how, if they need our assistance, how to ask for it. I think I answered that. I don't know if there's anything else.
No, that's perfect. Very good. I think, Ms. Russell, did you have one more question?
I thought I did my 3, but
Oh, okay.
I can ask another.
Dean, may I add something?
Absolutely.
We mentioned just a minute ago the Muslim community. So right outside of the city of Greer is the Upstate Islamic Center, and not only is it a worship center, but it's also a school. So they have from elementary all the way up to high school grades there. There have been a few occurrences over the past several years that there was some concern about safety with regards to the way that Americans, as we would call ourselves, would perceive those persons who were Muslim, but maybe not necessarily from the United States. So we reached out to the Islamic Center, and I'll tell you what, that was a very great experience, because they welcomed us with open arms, and they invited us to their school. We even brought our mayor with us, and we went and visited all the quite a few of the classes, and spoke with the principal of the school. And also the principal happens to be married to one of the professors, Malisi, at Furman University. And that even led into a whole nother series of relationships that we were able to establish with the Muslim leadership in the Greenville area. So, sometimes it just takes someone reaching out, and you never know, someone on the other end was just really hoping that might happen. And I'm telling you, we had a really good discussion and very frank talk about some of the things we're worried that maybe the other people think that we think this of them and all that. So we were able to clear the air of a lot of those things, and we ended up providing some extra police patrolling in their area, although technically it was outside the city limits of Greer. And I'm sure the sheriff's office had no problem with that, because it would probably be less work for them. But we were able to help them out with a few events. So that was great. I mean, all it took was just somebody picking the phone up and making a call. And those ended up in relationships for many, many months later that we're still in a good place. So anyway, I was just going to point that out. Sometimes someone just needs to take that first step.
Yeah, thank you.
If I
for
could
sharing.
add to that, Chief Hamby, you're right. They are a wonderful group of people. We have been there a couple of times to provide assessments of the property and some active shooter training, and a really good group of people. And was grateful that we were there to share some information. And then thank you also for assisting.
Can
Thank you.
I ask one more question then, since we tapped into where I was going?
Absolutely.
Yes, ma'am.
Can I have anyone to tell me what their particular area is doing to tackle unconscious biasness?
Okay, that's a very good question, very relevant to what we're doing here tonight. Chief Campos, would you like to address that one, please, sir?
Certainly. There are a lot of training regiments out there that have been focused on law enforcement to address this. We have adopted one through the gosh, the name just left me. It's the not IACP, it's the one through help me out, Matt, the PERF, through the PERF, the Police Executive Research Forum has a one where it addresses this through training, and it's not a specific training for this topic per se. It's how to integrate these things in all of the other training that we do. So the philosophy behind it is you introduce it into firearms training, you introduce it in defensive tactics training, you introduce it into driving training of all things. And it's a mindset to show the officers and get them to realize that some of their unconscious how do I put this, the bag that they pull from, or their toolbox that they pull from their life experiences, affect how they see things and how they react to things. And to know that that is occurring, and maybe slow down when you can slow down and say, well, maybe we need to look at this a little bit differently, and have more of a conversation and ask some more questions to kind of get an idea of what exactly is going on, instead of automatically jumping to a conclusion. And even in fast dynamic situations, how to employ that safely and still keep everybody safe at the same time, instead of automatically assuming. So there's a lot of training out there. I know that the Law Enforcement Academy at the state level has started to roll a lot of these things out. There's quarterly training that we have to do through video. It's a video training that we have to do. We also implement some of this in our policy when applicable, so that even in the policy, it says you have to be aware of these things. So that is how we have employed it. I know the University Police Department employs it over there, and several other agencies. I'm pretty sure the other law enforcement officials here will talk about how they've instituted that.
I just know from my own work and employment, day-to-day living activities, when you work around somebody every day, you begin to know their personality and their habits. So you can really tell if change is happening because of your own perspective and your own knowledge of past concepts and precepts with somebody and where they are now. So when you tell me that you have these different trainings and they're incorporated into other trainings, do you know for yourself that you're seeing it with some of your coworkers, that that what you're training is actually making a difference? Are you seeing a difference?
I'm going to say yes, and then I'm going to say maybe, and then I'm going to say no, because we're all human beings. And so I could give a training to somebody, but if they don't truly believe in what I'm telling them, then there's nothing I'm going to do to change their minds. It's something that they're going to have to see for themselves and adopt it themselves. And then there's some people that it just doesn't, it's not, they're never going to get to that point. They're going to believe what they're going to believe, and they don't care what anybody else tells them or says to them. And that's where, as leaders, we have to recognize those things, and then we need to start addressing them. And then, unfortunately, if it gets to a point where if they're not going to change or they refuse to change, then they may have to find another line of work, or they may have to find somewhere else to work because it's not going to work here. So some of those conversations you have with some of your employees, some people call them courageous conversations because they're difficult conversations to have. I can recall a few that I've had where the employee got very offended about the conversation because they thought I was trying to label them about something, and I wasn't trying to label them at all. I was trying to point out to them that what they were doing was alienating a specific group of people because they were using a label, for lack of a better description. And how they came about using that label was very innocent with a small group of people, but they took it upon themselves to continue to use that label for the larger group of people. And I had to point out to them, you can't do that. That small group of people may be okay with you using that label, but everyone as a whole doesn't accept that. And you can't continue to use it and say, well, so-and-so said I could use it. No, they said you could use it with them. They didn't say you could use it for everybody. So that was a senior member of my department I had that conversation with, and he got very upset, thought I was calling him out. And I wasn't. I was just trying to point out to him that you can't make those assumptions. But from his perspective, he grew up in an era where stuff like that was accepted by the general people, and he has to understand that while it may have been accepted back then, it's not acceptable now, and you have to be conscious of it. And so it was tough. It took a little while. He wouldn't talk to me for a couple of days.
Thank you. I'll pass the torch on. I know I've gone over my minutes.
Thank you, Ms. Russell. Ms. Davison Parker, your questions, please, ma'am.
Yeah, absolutely. So I just want to start by providing just a little bit of context around these questions, and they're going to be focused around mental health care. And so Prisma Health, they conduct a community needs assessment, community health needs assessment. They did so in 2019. And from that, they identified 3 priorities. One includes mental health, okay, obesity, drug use and abuse, okay. In addition to that, Bon Secours is also does the same thing, hospitals do that, the community health needs assessment of 2019. And residents have consistently, in Greenville County, have consistently reported an increase in poor mental health days monthly, impacting Greenville's economy, socially, leading to less productive workforce, increased emergency room use, instances of abuse and neglect, and increased drug use. We also know that the impact of COVID has done a doozy on our community. And so first question is, knowing these things, share with us the efforts that your forces are taking to begin to target or address mental health and substance use, whether it be within your team or as you're out in the community. How are you addressing it, whether it be training, education, and how are you responding to calls that may lend to mental health needs or substance use support?
I'm going to ask Sergeant Hill to talk about that. I know that she's part of an initiative that's going to be kicking off pretty soon. I don't want to speak like I know exactly what I'm talking about, but I know that I saw an email come up recently, so I would like for her to at least on the drug abuse part of it. So I'll let her speak on whatever she wants to answer that question, please.
Thank you. Within the sheriff's office, mental health is very important. for law enforcement as well as the community, there has been a lot of training that have been brought to law enforcement, to the deputies within the sheriff's office in reference to mental health and in reference to responding to what's going on in our communities pertaining to mental health, to where when we are responding to calls for service, considering the information that you're receiving from the complainant in reference to what's going on, and asking the right questions, so that as we approach the scene, or as the deputies approach the scene, that they are prepared. Also, in reference to obesity, going into the schools, as we do a lot of our community outreach in the schools, when we're doing a lot of the career days and touch a truck and things like that, and encouraging them to be more active, to not be inside playing games all the time, but being active, eating the right foods, different things like that. To be in law enforcement, one of the things we talk about, not having a criminal record, having good credit, and then we also throw in there to be active, to where you can either to be able to run, basically. And then the last thing, of course, what you were saying in reference to the drug use and abuse, we have started an opioids program. It's called the Power Initiative. And we started that back in 2021. And so this year we were able, or the end of last year, we were able to get some funding from a grant, a COSAP grant, to where we have a lot of different partners, mental health partners, drug treatment partners, to where we're going to utilize those funds to play an active role when it comes to prevention, and to make sure that we acknowledge that when you're utilizing drugs, a lot of times that crosses over into mental health. And so being able to provide resources and connect the pieces in reference to our partners, we're really looking forward to it. And we've started doing a little bit in reference to a walk-in referral location, to where community members can walk in and obtain resources and different things like that. It's a non-arrest location, to where we want you to come in and receive help and start a future with without using drugs. And so, utilizing the partners that we have collaborated with, it's going to be a big help, or has been a big help to the community.
That sounds great.
If I may add just a little commentary to that, in Greer, we are probably like every other law enforcement agency. We're seeing calls that involve persons in some sort of crisis, not just daily, but throughout the day and throughout the night. It's every single shift. We are dealing with someone who is either homeless or in some sort of mental health crisis, and I don't think that somebody in the autistic spectrum qualifies as mental health issues. It's more of like another sort of crisis challenge that we end up dealing with, but also those who are under very significant drug addiction issues. So a lot of times those three things, homelessness, mental health challenges or crisis, and then also drug use, they all kind of overlap a lot of times. So one thing we're looking at doing is trying to request a position in our next upcoming budget that would be a one person within our police agency, where their full-time job is following up with these people that we run into when police officers are dispatched out, or they just run across a situation where, you know, they have someone who is in the middle of a crisis and there's really not an answer. Arrest isn't always the answer. I mean, that's sometimes a police officer or a deputy on the scene, their options get pretty limited pretty quick on what they can do, because pretty soon they have to be going to another call. So they don't have a whole lot of discretionary time to follow up and get these people connected to the services that they need. So we're we're going to be proposing a funded through our city budget, one full-time position that does nothing but follow up with those persons who are I just call them falling into those cracks. And it's going to be someone who forms relationships with all of these help organizations in the upstate and get them connected. You know, you can lead a horse to water, you can't always make them drink, but at least we will do what we can to try to get them before the people who can actually help them extensively. So that's something that we're saying that we're going to have to focus on, because otherwise, I mean, we're dealing with the same people over and over and over again. They are stuck in a cycle. They're stuck in a situation that the traditional police services are not going to fix. So that's an evolving issue. And I've heard it even said, this isn't for me, but I've heard other people say that the largest single provider of mental health in our state is the Department of Corrections. So, and that's not what they're created for.
Right.
But they have the largest population day in, day out who need these services that they aren't getting. So we're going to try to figure out a way to help the situation. Do I think we can fix it all? Of course not. But we're going to try to put some effort into diverting people to where they need help.
Mhm.
So I'm going to chime in here. This topic, we could have a whole nother session on this topic. Okay. First, I had all my officers go through mental health first aid through Prisma. Prisma has a grant to offer that. And anybody that's listening to this, I highly recommend that you seek out that training for your departments. I've even recommended to my administrator that all city workers attend that training. It is just like medical first aid, but about mental health, and it educates people about all of the different conditions, how they present. Doesn't make you a practitioner, but we all know when you cut yourself and you're bleeding, you need a bandage. Well, it's the same thing with mental health. If they're presenting a certain way, they're probably having an issue and they need help, and that will get, hopefully, in our community, people to call on resources before it's a 911 situation. And so we have to get our community to have that kind of education. The other thing I'll follow up on is resources. The state does is down at the bottom of mental health, the dollars spent on mental health. A lot of the times I saw some of the previous questions, you know, what about EPC? A lot of those processes are very staff intensive for our agencies, and a lot of us are having staffing issues as it is. They've got to set up a system where it's a little bit easier for people to get to those resources in a crisis situation. There are other states that have examples. As I said earlier, I'm from Florida. Florida has some laws down there and a system set up, and Florida's at the bottom of spending too. So I'm not going to champion, they need to spend more money too. But it's easier for law enforcement and first responders to take someone in that's a danger to themselves or others because of substance abuse or for mental health, and get them to an evaluation treatment facility, and doesn't tie up that first responder for hours or longer to get that kind of assistance. So I think some of those things need to change. I would also like to see the law changed where it relinquishes the officers from any kind of civil liability when they take somebody in under an EPC. Some of the other states have passed that, and that would probably help some of the officers make that decision when it needs to be made without being fearful of getting sued because they took somebody that may or may not need to go. So, but like I said, we could talk about this for hours.
Well, Chief Campos, I want to kind of flip it to the other part of Tiffany's question, and maybe for you and also Chief Hamby, you know, your profession is a high stress field for you and your team. Then add COVID on top of it, which, you know, has been challenging from a home standpoint for every person in this country and beyond. How do you, as the leader of your team, work with your team and try to ensure the continued mental health of the members of your force?
Well, the training is not only for the community, but it's also internally for our officers as well and our supervisors, so that they can see their coworkers and see their behavior and kind of say, okay, something's going on here. Let's have a chat. Our city provides employee assistance program where officers can anonymously and without anyone knowing can get counseling services through our EAP provider. Also, the state of South Carolina has SE LEAP, or the Law Enforcement Assistance Program. Now they're geared more for the aftermath of a critical incident or something like that, but they still have resources available to all first responders in the event that they need help. But one of the things that we do internally, we've learned is, especially on critical incidents or just a high stress incident, in briefings, it's good to go through what we call a debriefing, to talk out some of those things, to not hold those things in, to just, critique not only what we did so we could do something better in the future, but kind of give a forum for people to get some of that stuff out instead of keeping it in. One of the things that we try to impress upon our officers, there's a book out there that's written by Dr. Gilmartin called The Emotional Survival for Law Enforcement. It talks about hypervigilance. It talks about bottling these things up and not getting it out healthily, where, traditionally in the past, officers have reverted to different activities to get this stuff off their chest, and it wasn't healthy activities. So officer wellness is another topic within the upper management world, and in ensuring that there's good health, good diet, good exercise, and doing all of these things as part of their mental health. It's not just about mental health. So we have to encourage our leaders to be attentive and see, look for these warning signs and then start making referrals. One of the hurdles that we have with that, though, is it's just the same adage is, I can lead a horse to water, but I can't make him drink. So we run into that a lot of times because this can be stigmatized within our own profession, even though we try it not to be. So nobody wants to be the weakling. Nobody wants to be perceived as a weakling, and sometimes they perceive it that way. So we as leaders have to continually encourage our younger officers to seek this help, especially with the different dynamics in our communities today. Encourage them to seek that help, and it's not a weakness if you are getting that help. I think I addressed that.
Absolutely. Thank you.
I believe Major Ty Miller wanted to comment as well.
Yes, and you basically covered the majority actually of what we're doing as well. That book is an invaluable resource, but I think a big piece of putting that together is that if the officer understands how trauma affects what they do every day, they're going to be much more sensitive when they respond to our community and see somebody who's experiencing trauma. And so our goal, when every officer is hired at Greenville County, is to they read that book and they have to write like a little paper on it. And it's just so that they read it and understand the power of trauma and how you might be a different person when you start law enforcement than when you finish law enforcement. And it's really important that you maintain your health for the sake of not just you and your family, but also how you serve our community. And we've made it a real big point to focus that when they start there, mental health is something that we talk about all the time. And we're trying to remove that stigma for officers so that they can feel comfortable saying, I'm having a hard day. And then when they understand how to deal and be open about their own traumas, when they do respond to those people that are having mental health issues out in the community, they're going to be more aware of how to relate to them and also to encourage them the best way to deal with those things. We've actually brought in a company called Responder Support Services that actually does trauma therapy for our officers. And it's been an invaluable resource for our officers to be able to quietly call and make an appointment. They can go during the day if they have some time and deal with whatever's going on with them. We feel like if you're healthy personally, you're going to be a better law enforcement officer and serve our community in a much better, stronger way.
And Dean, if you don't mind, I want to make sure that Shakita Davis, who's a deputy with Greenville Sheriff's Office, she's also in attendance with us this evening. So Deputy Davis, if you had anything to add, please feel free to jump in too.
Good evening, everyone. I would like to add that Greenville County Sheriff's Office, we also have an operation called Safe Outcomes, and it's a voluntary program. So what that allows to occur is that if you have a family member who may be dealing with some type of illness, may that be Alzheimer's, dementia, a child or any other relative that may have autism, or just anything that you think would cause issue if they had contact with law enforcement, it gives you the opportunity to register that individual. It'll ask you a lot of background information. What do they like? What they don't like? Are they fearful of the gear that we have on when we come? Are they combative? When we deal with individuals who have dementia, they wander off. Are there certain places that they like to go more frequently? I've taken autism training, so I know, for example, when I'm dealing with a patient, or excuse me, an individual who may have autism, they like to go near water for calmness. So making sure that we're checking to see if neighbors have pools or things of that nature. So it allows us to have that stuff up front, and it also allows us to have a visual of who we're looking for. So deputies may be coming from a number of different areas within that beat location. And as we're doing that, we're being visual of who we're passing along the way. So knowing and having an updated photo of what that individual may look like assist us while we're en route before we get to that location. So not only can a person register themselves, but family members can register individuals. So when this information is obtained through our program, it goes to our CAD and our dispatch center. So deputies are getting this information while en route to the call. So not only, again, with the photo, not only knowing some things to be mindful of if they do make contact with an individual, but being able to mentally prepare for a possible game plan before arrival. So that helps a lot. So again, it's a voluntary program. All you have to do is go through our website, greenvillecountysheriffsoffice.org, and type in Safe Outcomes, the Safe Outcomes operation. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Wow. That was a loaded question, right? That was a loaded question. So, but I'm glad to hear that there is much being done to break stigma, to increase education, to increase advocacy, not just for the community, but also for our responders, for those who are keeping us safe. And I mean, I got to give you kudos for that. So thank you for that effort. I believe, Dean, you really piggybacked on my second question, which is, what are you doing for yourselves, right? So thanks for asking that. So then that leads me to my third question. I recall across the state, I guess it was right when school started, there was a situation where all these hoax calls came. You guys remember that? And schools were being addressed. I mean, you guys sent out the teams, you were doing it with, quick action. And in that, how do you go about ensuring that, we talk about this trauma response, how do you go about ensuring that the babies, the kids aren't then left traumatized because of this? What had to be done was shut down, right? The schools had to shut down because of these hoax calls that were being made that said that we're going to shoot up the school, or, things like that. So how do you, I don't know whether that be through education of the, educating the students, the leadership, or how do you ensure safety for schools and the teachers and the scholars that are there, but then do it in a way that does not increase trauma or anxiety or things like that? I know it's a tricky thing, right? Because you guys, you got to respond. So, but how do you do that in a way that's still as quick as it was here in this upstate area, and ensures safety, but doesn't aid to increase anxiety for students or even the teachers. Because, you know, I actually spoke about this matter on Fox News about, you know, what the impacts could lend to, you know, right? And how, you know, not only are teachers feeling the stress of it, but the students and the parents, and, you know, so, you know, anything that you can add to that dialogue. How do we do that as a community, and with you?
I would ask if anybody from, you know, we have 2 or 3 of you from the sheriff's office. I know the sheriff's office probably has more exposure to, you know, they had Tanglewood Middle School from a year or so ago. You know, you guys lived it firsthand, so I don't know if you have any commentary on that.
I can speak to that just because I was out there. And those are what we've really focused on is relationship. And so if those children see us, you know, not just when things are really bad, but if we're in their lives and trying to create those relationships, you'll often see our sheriff who goes to reads, you know, books in schools. And so when they see us, they know they see us as helpers instead of as big scary people that come in and clear out a school. We've made a real point to kind of create those types of relationships in our schools with our students. Tanglewood specifically, there was of course a whole group of people that had to go in to ensure that the school was safe, but there was also with the sheriffs a group of people that were there just to love on those children. And I can personally say that I walked out several children that just, you know, it was just a scary thing. It just is. You don't, when people are running around and they don't know what's safe and what's not safe. Having law enforcement that's aware of how that affects them emotionally and being able to just love on them and say and calm them down and say, hey, it's okay. We're, you know, everything is, you are safe now. We're just going to get you to a place where we can get you home. That relationship has been really crucial for us. I do think that it's, you know, in the big picture with the mental health with children, we are looking at making sure that the lines of communication are open more in 2023 than ever have been with before. And we're looking at putting in place things that are, we're actually in conversation with the school district about how we can better communicate with teachers and administrators so that everybody is on the same page in order to better support children in their mental health.
Thank you for that. You know, this is a really rich dialogue and I'm glad to be a part of it. And I just want to put this out there to each and every person here. Universal Therapeutic Services, we are here to be part of the solution and partner with you, you know, and serve together and increase safe communities together. So Sergeant Hill, Chief Hambry, Chief Campos, you know, the rest of the officers that are on board, however we can be of a support, don't hesitate to call me. I got my number right in the chat, or send me an email. I would love to talk about how we can support your efforts. We have a large team, and actually Keisha is one of our therapists that are on here today who used to serve as an officer. I'm calling her out, Keisha Harper. She used to serve as an officer and she's actually getting her degree in criminal justice, actually her doctorate degree, I think, Keisha, but nonetheless, just want to put it out there that we're here to partner with you guys and here to serve. And so we can provide training, we can, you know, whatever you need. Okay. So that wraps up my questions. Thank you so much for responding. Thank you for having me here.
Thank you so much, Ms. Davidson Parker. This has been a very engaging dialogue. I'm gonna try to get a couple more questions in before our time is up. One question is, what is being done to decrease racial profiling?
The unconscious bias, I think, was addressed to a certain extent. We definitely don't want to discount that that topic. So one thing when I was listening to some of the other answers, they were fabulous, but I think I'll probably speak for the other law enforcement agencies as well. But I think it all starts with who do you even hire? If you're gonna trust someone to have the authority to remove someone's freedom, which, by the way, police officers and sheriff's deputies are some of the only people who can remove your freedom, and trust someone to carry a gun and use deadly force when it's possible or necessary. You have to make sure you're hiring only those people with the highest moral character. And we have to do a very, very extensive background investigation before we even hire someone. If someone's going to be, using some sort of racial bias or discrimination in the way that they police, we absolutely do not want them as a part of our team. We will try everything we possibly can to weed those people out from ever stepping foot into our agency. But secondly, it's the culture inside the agency that is extremely important. I'll give an example of just something that happened here a couple of years back, but it was a new hire, and somehow or another we didn't catch that there was an issue. It was a new hire. He'd never made it to the academy or anything like that, but he was in a situation where he sat down and had lunch with a group of people from our agency. There happened to be an African-American officer from our team who was a part of that group. And this new hire was basically kind of in a ride-along status at that time, made a comment. And the comment wasn't particularly purposefully ugly, but it had enough context in it where it raised a lot of eyebrows, and it wasn't good. It did not need to happen, and that's not acceptable at our agency. So that was a probationary employee. We didn't have any kind of reason to hold them on. I dismissed that person, so that person no longer works here. I saw enough yellow flag there that just needed to be addressed, and I made sure that's not welcome here. And I was very proud that the other officers who were present when that comment was made, they stood up and said that's not cool. You can't talk like that here. And so it's the culture. I'm hoping that when not only do we set those standards up front, but as they come on and be a part of our team, they look around and they see how our other employees, our other officers are behaving, and they'll realize that hopefully that the example set by their teammates, that's not how we do business here. But we place a high value. We know that the reputation of our agency rests on really the worst person we would have here. So if we have someone who's got any kind of issues with bias or discrimination, it's going to show itself sooner or later, and we will all end up dealing with that reputation. So we want to make sure that never even sets foot here. So that's kind of the way I would try to explain that. And I'm not sure if any of the other officers, law enforcement representatives would like to add anything to that.
I would like to add something. Although I know there is racial profiling, a lot of times educating the communities, and I know being a part of the neighborhood watch groups, a lot of times going into the communities, and one of the complaints that a lot of the communities have is racial profiling. However, once they understand a deputy being assigned to a beat area in certain communities, they kind of get the gist of what happens. For an example, if I am working in an area and it's predominantly a white community, the majority of the people that I will stop will be a white person, and it's vice versa. If there's a white officer assigned to a black community, the same thing. And oftentimes educating the community based on if they see a specific officer riding in that community, it's not because they are Profiling is the fact that they are assigned to that beat area, and 2 to 4 days a week, sometimes more, depending on your shift, that's the person you're going to see. And a lot of times, making sure the community is educated and sharing a lot of information that they just are not familiar with also breaks down that barrier, and it helps a lot as well. And then also from a community service division with the community patrol deputies or the CAT team, being in the communities, letting the community members get to know them, addressing issues, not only in the communities and the residential areas, but even in the stores, the businesses, the churches and things like that. And so again, it just, having that communication and making sure that we have those partnerships that can make a huge difference when things are going on. Because a lot of times just to be able to explain what's going on makes a difference.
Thank you, Sergeant. Yeah, that was going to be my next question regarding the officers getting to know the community and building relationships. So you kind of touched on that. I appreciate that. I see that Miss Miss Tanya Winbush has a question. She has a hand raised. You can come off mute and you can ask your question or make your statement. Ms. Winbush? Okay.
Do we have to unmute her?
Okay, I had a hard time coming off mute.
Oh,
I
there you go.
apologize.
That's okay.
But no, I just wanted to piggyback off of that question in reference to, identifying people who maybe have an unconscious bias. And I want to know, how do you address it when it's the same race? I've had an encounter where I'm happen to be friends with a lot of law enforcement, and it turns my stomach when I hear, and I'm a Black female, when I hear other Black officers say that Black people are just known to be more violent or commit more crime. And when I hear that, I correct it, but I wonder, have any of you all experienced that? And if you do, when it's, the same race bias, because it could be, a white officer saying that about white people, or a Hispanic officer saying it about Hispanic people, that's like a different dynamic. How do you address it when it's of the same race and those biases are within itself?
Chief Campos, if you wouldn't mind addressing that. I'm not sure if you've actually had to deal with that, but if you haven't, how would you handle that?
Well, I'll start out by saying, and I'll kind of echo what Sergeant Hill said, we need to have a conversation to understand what racial bias really means. Racial profiling really means. Because in law enforcement, profiling in and of itself based on criminal elements is not illegal. But profiling based strictly on sex, race, or the other protected classes is. So if we're sending an officer into a neighborhood and we're asking them to address a crime issue, and they are using the information about the crimes that are being committed in that, and they're focused on individuals that may be engaged in that activity, and the people that they're constantly stopping are of a specific demographic, it's not necessarily meaning that racially profiling, and they're focusing on the tasks that we put at hand. When you make a blanketed comment like you just mentioned about how more violence is seen amongst African Americans or something like that, it is a concern. And that is something that you need to have a conversation with that individual to kind of get more of a context of where they're coming from, where that comment is coming from. It's not necessarily an automatic litmus test to say, oh, that person's being racially biased. They may be commenting on what their personal experiences have been, and it could be based on what Sergeant Hill said, a particular area of town that they work all the time. That's the only people that they come into contact with, and they tend to be violent, okay? But we need to address those to ensure with them that they don't think that way of everyone of color, that they're talking about maybe people that they specifically have dealt with over time, and having that conversation. And in those conversations, if we hear information coming out that it's not going where it needs to go, then some kind of corrective measure needs to be taken at that point. And like Chief Hamby said, if we can't get to that point where we think that they are honestly doing their job as expected, then we have to take the measures to remove them from that job or not have them employed anymore, because it's not acceptable. So I've had a lot of community meetings with folks who they see a specific activity and they automatically assign it to it's racially motivated. But once we dissect it further, it's not necessarily motivated by race, but it is motivated by the activity that is occurring in that particular area. And I know a lot of people don't like to hear that answer because they think I'm trying to erode the fact that racial profiling does occur. It does occur. There's examples of it everywhere, but we have to examine it when it's brought up to see if it really meets that or not.
Thank you for that answer. I appreciate that.
Keisha, we have about 5 minutes. So if you have maybe one more type of question that we haven't gotten to, a topic, or something that you want to make sure we finish up on, I think we have time for one more.
I do. Unless
Okay.
Oh, okay. And this is different. In my community, in my neighborhood, there are times, mainly on the weekends, late at night, we have to hear gunshots. And it's not every weekend, it's not every night at 2 o'clock or something like that. That's a standard. But we have this issue. I'm not the only one that has called. My neighbors we've had conversations about when we call 911 or when we call the 7-digit number. If we're in the county, what happens compared to when we're in the city, what happens? And I understand, I think it was Sergeant Hill that made a comment about, an officer may be assigned and working a particular area 2 days or 3 days or different shifts and this kind of thing. But is there a standard or a process where late nights that we have an officer assigned to our community when there's so many calls being made about a particular issue, that we have officers close by, is one question. The other question relating to that is, there have been times when we've called and made reports about certain things happening. And if we call the desk and talk to the desk officer, there's a lot of questions. I understand them needing information and why they ask some questions. But for me, myself, I've had it where they've asked questions and I still feel like they didn't send the officer. And it was simply because I said, I don't want the officer to knock on my door at 3 o'clock in the morning, is the way that it comes across, because it's more about if you want an officer to come and talk with you after they have done some type of research. And if you say no, you kind of feel like you're being ignored. Or is it, not to just answer your question, I understand, like you said, it's about the perception. Is it that me and my neighbors have one perception and it's not what's happening? So give me some information to take back.
So that particular question, Ms. Russell, I think might be localized to your specific question is, probably dealing with the Sterling community. So I know I think I heard you say partially in the city limits of Greenville and partially in the county. So with that, I would probably ask if anybody from Greenville Sheriff's Office would want to address that.
I can speak to the part in reference to the county portion of Sterling. So if a call comes out and it's referencing the sound of potential gunshots, that's going to be a call where typically 2, maybe 3 deputies are going to try to attempt to respond. Dispatch is going to ask questions. If you don't make the statements, well, how many gunshots do you think that you heard? Possibly what direction do you think those gunshots come from? And then we're en route. What I run into frequently is once we're in the area, because I could be 6, 7 minutes away, someone else could be 2, the next backup could be 10, is the sounds are gone. So even if we are trying to do more patrol in the area, isn't a guarantee that we would actually find a potential suspect or evidence to support the number of shots or things of that nature. So what we encourage individuals to do, if after an incident like that has occurred and you don't want law enforcement to come to your door at that time, if that's 1, 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, whatever the time may be, is just to put in a general request for extra patrol in your area. So you or any other neighbors can call into our non-emergency number through dispatch and put your address on file. What happens with that is in increments of 2 weeks, we will do extra patrol in your area for certain hours. So you have the option to select if you want that to take place during the week, if you want that to weekdays, if you want it to be weekends. You can suggest a specific time frame, or you can just say randomly. So there will be no specific deputy who will be responsible for appealing to that. But when that mass notification goes out, you'll have the multiple deputies who patrol that beat area frequently in and out.
So, Ms. Russell, hopefully you were as impressed as I was with the immediacy of her response and the specifics of it. I thought that was excellent. Obviously, there are always individual situations and things happen, but Officer Davis, I just have to commend you on your response, because you did a great job there of really explaining on the fly what I would assume is a very challenging situation that you deal with on a regular basis. So thank you so much for that. And that is a great way to, unfortunately, to end this session, because as I expected, we could go on for even longer than our 90 minutes. And I think that is a testament to both our law enforcement folks who are part of this today and to our community. This has been another wonderful session to hear about some of the processes. And, one of the things is I've said that I have learned over this 2+ years that we've been doing this is that, as Chief Hamby often says, our law enforcement officers take their job very seriously, because it has a very serious consequence potentially for all involved. And so they don't take it lightly, and they do go through a lot of training. I know we hear, as we've talked about a little, throughout this, anecdotes and negative things. And there's that in every profession, certainly. But I feel comforted by the fact that I think, and hopefully all of you on this call or that have been hearing this tonight are comforted to know that our law enforcement folks do take it very seriously, that they are, recognize that there are challenges and perceptions or misperceptions about some of the things, and that they are really trying to make sure that every person has a safe opportunity to be part of a safe culture. There are certainly challenges. We've talked about the mental health. We've talked about a lot of things, and I look forward as we move into this year with our Beyond the Shield sessions. We will be looking at some of those, and who knows, Tiffany, we may be back at mental health for a full session, as Chief Campos suggested here in the near future. So if any of you, I would encourage, if you have a topic or something you would like to see us dive deeper into in this Beyond the Shield series, please let myself know, or Justine, or Chief Hamby, because we really want to make sure that we are tailoring these sessions to our community and the transparency between our law enforcement and our community members. So I want to very much thank all of you, Chief Hamby, Chief Campos, Officer Hill, Officer Joy, Officer Davis, everyone who has been part of this from our law enforcement. Thank you so much. And then to Tiffany Davidson Parker and Ms. Russell, thank you both for leading the conversation, but also to others who helped contribute. And then, of course, Keisha Nelson, also thank you. I want to follow up by saying that we will be sending the YouTube version of this to everyone, and then we will also be making this into a podcast, and we will be sharing that. So if there are other people who were not able to be on tonight that you think would be interested in hearing some of the comments and the dialogue tonight, please know you will have the opportunity to share that with them. So for Justine has put her email and mine in the comments. You will you've received emails from her, you'll receive more, but I again want to thank everyone for taking the time to be with us tonight and to be part of this. And with that, we're a couple minutes past our time, but I think it's been, hopefully everyone has felt it's time well worth it. And again, I want to thank all of you for being with us tonight.
Thank you very much. Good night.
Thank you.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Good night.
Appreciate it.